Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. By the time the city stopped pretending everything was fine, I had already spent 2 nights sleeping in a janitor's closet with a mop bucket as my door alarm. That sounds ridiculous, but it worked. A 5-gallon plastic bucket tips loud enough to wake you up, and in those first days, waking up was the difference between staying alive and becoming just another shape wandering the streets. My name is Owen Hartley. I am a facilities maintenance supervisor for a cluster of buildings in Center City, Philadelphia, mostly offices and retail spaces stitched together by basements, loading corridors, and utility tunnels that nobody thinks about until a pipe bursts. I knew the underside of the city better than most people who lived on top of it. I knew which doors were supposed to be locked but never were, which stairwells went down farther than the directory claimed, and where the old freight elevators still had power if you talked to the right panel the right way. When the outbreak hit, that knowledge did not feel like an advantage at first. It felt like a curse. I kept seeing all the places where people could hide and all the places where they could get trapped. The public story is neat and simple. A fast illness, a panic, an emergency declaration. Then the dead started moving. The truth is the city didn't flip a switch. It slid. It slid from crowded sidewalks to empty streets, from sirens to silence, from normal to something that had no name yet. The infected were not movie monsters. They were sick people whose brains had become a broken radio stuck on one station. They moved with purpose but without planning. They reacted to sound and motion and light. They did not think, but they did not quit. On the 3rd day, the last commuter trains I saw were stopped in the stations like they'd run out of courage. People pressed against the glass, doors stuck open. A few figures moved wrong on the platforms, and everyone else backed away from them without needing to be told. I was inside the service corridor beneath a retail block off Market Street, in a place most shoppers never knew existed. My phone was a brick. The building's security desk was empty. The mall music had died mid-song and never come back. The emergency lights were on, washing the concrete in a weak yellow. I had stayed because I told myself I was useful. I could keep water running, I could keep doors locked, I could keep the generators fueled if the grid failed. That was the kind of story a person tells himself when the alternative is admitting he is scared and alone. That morning, I heard pounding from the loading dock stairwell and I flattened behind a pallet of bottled water like I was in a war movie. The pounding came again, followed by a voice that sounded human. "Hey, anybody down there, please?" I waited. I listened for the dragging cadence I had started to recognize. The infected didn't say words. They made breath noises. They made short animal sounds. The voice above me was full of sentences. "I'm not sick," the voice said. I'm not infected. I just need somewhere to go." I didn't answer right away. That was another lesson the city taught fast. People could be desperate and still be dangerous. People could also be honest and still bring trouble with them. The pounding became a series of smaller knocks, like the person had realized that too much noise was a bad idea. "Please," the voice said again, quieter. "I can hear things outside. I can't stay up there." I edged forward and peered around the pallet. The stairwell door at the far end of the corridor was cracked open by a few inches. A sliver of light cut the darkness. I could have stayed hidden and let the door swing shut. I could have done the safest thing. Instead, I walked to the door and pushed it open enough to see the person. He was a security guard, mid-30s, wearing a dark uniform shirt with the company patch half torn off. He had a cheap radio clipped to his shoulder and a flashlight taped to it like he'd been improvising. His name tag said Ken, but the letters were smeared with grime. His eyes fixed on me so hard I could feel the relief in his posture. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you. I thought I was going to have to run back out." "What's up there?" I asked. "Bad," he said. "Two of them in the lobby, maybe more outside. They heard something. They keep wandering back." I nodded. I didn't ask how he knew. Everyone knew by then. "You learned in the first hour you saw one." "You alone?" I asked. Ken shook his head. "I had a partner. We got separated. I don't know. I couldn't go back." I let him in and shut the stairwell door. I twisted the handle and felt the latch seat. I didn't trust it, so I dragged a rolling bin of broken tile in front of it. Ken watched me do it and nodded like he understood the ritual. "What's your name?" he asked. "Owen," I said. He swallowed. "You work here?" "Buildings," I said, "not just this one." He looked around the corridor like it was a bunker already. "You know places to hide." "I know places people forget exist," I said. "That's not the same thing." We moved deeper into the service level, away from the stairwell. The corridor branched into a network of rooms and hallways. Electrical closets, storage cages, a mechanical room that hummed with the low, steady noise of air-handling equipment still running off utility power. The building above might have been dead, but the building below was stubborn. Ken followed me like he was trying not to step on anything loud. "You got food?" he asked. "Some," I said. "Not enough for a crowd." He nodded, like he'd already accepted that. We made it to the mechanical room, and I shut the steel door behind us. The room smelled like dust and warm metal. There were two big air-handling units, belts turning, fans spinning behind mesh guards. I put my hand near a duct and felt a faint breeze. Ken leaned against a concrete column and looked like he might slide down it. "How long can we stay?" he asked. That was the question everyone wanted to ask. It was also the question nobody could answer honestly. "Depends," I said. "Power, water, air, and whether anyone finds us." Ken made a dry laugh. "Air?" I pointed up. "All this is connected. If the city's air is full of smoke or something worse and these units pull it in, we breathe it. If the filters clog, the units stall. If the power goes out, the fans stop and then you've got stale air in a box." Ken stared at the equipment like it had just turned into a monster. "Then what?" he asked. "Then we do what people did before buildings had machines," I said. "We open doors and hope the outside isn't worse." Ken rubbed his face with both hands. His fingers left streaks of gray. "I can't go back up," he said. "Not right now." "I didn't ask you to," I said. I was about to lead him to the small break room I had claimed as my base when a sound came through the door behind us. A muffled scrape, like something heavy brushing the metal. Ken froze. His eyes widened. The scrape came again, closer. Then a soft thud. We both stared at the door. I put a finger to my lips and moved toward the door with slow steps. I didn't have anything heroic in my hands. I had a wrench in my belt and a flashlight. The kind of tools that fix pipes and open access panels. Not the kind that makes you feel brave. Another thud. Not hard, but insistent. Ken leaned toward me, whispering. They followed me. I listened. I tried to separate the normal building noises from the wrong ones. The air handlers hummed. Water pipes ticked. Somewhere, a relay clicked like a nervous insect. Then the door handle on the mechanical room twitched. Not turned, not pushed, twitched. Like a hand had found it, but didn't understand it. I backed away and gestured for Ken to move. He did, stepping behind one of the air-handling units, out of sight. I grabbed a metal chair from the corner and wedged it under the door handle in a crude brace. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The handle twitched again and the chair legs squealed against the floor. Ken's breathing was loud. He tried to swallow it down. The door shuddered once, as if whatever was outside had leaned into it. Then it stopped. Silence lasted long enough that my heart began to slow, and then a new sound started in the corridor outside. Not a shuffling, not a drag. It was a series of quick footsteps running away. Ken and I stared at each other. "That wasn't them," Ken mouthed. "No," I whispered back. We waited. Another minute, two, the door didn't move again. I didn't like any of that. The infected didn't run away unless something pulled them. Sound, light, movement. Something had drawn them off. Ken's voice was barely there. "Other people?" "Or worse," I said. I led Ken out through a side door that connected to a maintenance passage. It was narrower and lower, lined with pipes wrapped in old insulation. Some of that insulation was crumbly and suspicious-looking, so I kept my mouth shut and my breathing shallow until we were past it. You didn't want to stir the dust in these old places. The outbreak wasn't the only thing that could ruin you. My break room was not a real break room anymore. It was a tiny command center made from scavenged supplies. Bottled water stacked in a corner, a few boxes of granola bars, a first aid kit I'd taken from the building's safety cabinet, 2 battery lanterns, and a paper map of the building's lower levels taped to the wall. Ken stared like it was a palace. "You planned this," he said. "I got lucky," I said. "And I know where they keep keys." I gave him water. He drank too fast and coughed. We were settling into the shaky calm that sometimes follows danger when a different noise reached us through the walls. It was faint, like a radio playing in another room. Voices, 2, maybe 3. Ken stiffened. "That's people." I stood still and listened. The voices were real, human cadence. No animal rasp, no single broken syllable. I felt something in my chest that was almost relief, and then immediately distrustful. I wasn't the only person who knew the underside of the city had places to hide. I wasn't the only person who thought basements meant safety. I motioned for Ken to stay put. I took my flashlight and moved out into the corridor, stepping softly. The voices grew clearer as I approached an intersection where a service hallway met an older, darker tunnel. The newer hallway had painted cinder block walls and fluorescent fixtures. The older tunnel was bare concrete and brick, with arching ceilings, and a sense of being forgotten on purpose. The voices came from that older tunnel. I angled my flashlight down, not directly at the sound. Light could be an invitation. "Hello?" I called, not loud. The voices stopped. A moment later, a woman's voice answered, steady and controlled. "Who's there?" "A building guy," I said. "Maintenance." A pause, then, "Are you alone?" "No," I said, "but we're not infected." That word had become a password. The light in the old tunnel shifted. A flashlight beam swung toward me, then down. 3 figures emerged, hands raised slightly, palms visible. They moved like people who had learned to announce themselves before they were mistaken for something else. The first was a woman in a reflective safety vest over a dark jacket. Her hair was tied back tight. She carried a hard-sided tool case and a clipboard, which was the strangest thing I had seen in days. The second was a man with a paramedic jacket, the kind with bright striping and a department logo, though I couldn't see which department. He looked tired in a way that was deeper than lack of sleep. He carried a backpack that sagged with weight. The third was a younger woman with a library tote bag slung over her shoulder, like she'd grabbed the first thing she could carry. She held a compact flashlight and a ring of keys. The woman in the vest spoke first. "I'm Marisol Velez," she said. "Structural engineer. The clipboard isn't a joke, it's how I keep my head straight." The paramedic nodded once. "Darnell Price," he said. "Emergency medical services. Off-duty, technically, nothing is off-duty now." The younger woman lifted her chin. "June Park," she said. "Free library, archives. I know that sounds like the least useful job right now, but I also know where a lot of doors are supposed to be." That made me look at her keys. "Who are you?" Marisol asked. "Owen Hartley," I said. "Facilities. I'm under this block because the streets are bad." Marisol's eyes flicked to the newer corridor behind me. "We're looking for a place that's more than a basement," she said. "Something sealed, something built for this kind of situation." I didn't answer right away because that was the exact thought I had been holding in my head like a fragile egg. The idea of a place designed to keep the outside out. The idea of a door you could close and trust. I'd spent years crawling through lower levels and old spaces. I had seen signs that hinted at things that used to be there. Bricked-up openings, heavy hinges bolted into concrete, faded stenciled arrows that pointed nowhere. I had never found the place the arrows were meant for. Until that morning, when I followed a leak in the ceiling and noticed the wall didn't sound right when I tapped it. Hollow behind the cinder block. Not a storage cavity, something bigger. I hadn't broken into it yet. I had stared at it and walked away, because once you open a door, you can't pretend it was never there. Marisol watched my face like she was reading the answer on it. "You know something," she said. "I might," I admitted. "But it's not a guarantee, and doors go both ways." Darnell shifted his weight. "We've all learned that," he said quietly. "We're not here to take anything from you. We're here to stop running for 1 hour." Ken appeared behind me, stepping into the corridor. His presence made everyone tense for a second, then relax when they saw his face and his empty hands. "More people?" Ken asked. "More people," I said. I could have sent them away. I could have guarded my little stash of water and granola bars like a dragon. But the city above was a problem that didn't care about my pride. 4 people could be a team. 2 people were just 2 people. "Come on," I said. "We talk in a room with a door." We brought them back to my break room. The space suddenly felt smaller, like it was admitting it was never meant to hold hope. Marisol looked at my taped map and leaned in. "You have a layout." "Partial," I said. "The rest is in my head." June sat carefully on the edge of a chair and pulled a folded paper from her tote. "I found this in a file drawer behind a reference desk," she said. "It was labeled Municipal Emergency Preparedness. It's old, but it mentioned something under the commercial district, a civil defense shelter. Cold War era." Darnell let out a breath. "So, it's not just a rumor." June shook her head. "It's real, but it doesn't say where the access is. It says the location was restricted and kept off most building plans." Marisol's eyes sharpened. "That makes sense," she said. "They didn't want every contractor and tenant knowing where the city's hiding hole was." Ken crossed his arms. "You know where it is," he said to me, not a question. "I found something that could be it," I said. "A wall that shouldn't be hollow. In a service corridor that shouldn't dead end. But I didn't open it." "Why not?" Darnell asked. "Because if it's sealed," I said, "it's sealed for a reason. Could be nothing. Could be structural risk, could be contamination, could be a door that closes behind you." June's fingers tightened on her keys. "The paper says the shelter had supplies," she said. "Food and water, medical, radios. It says it was designed to support people for weeks." Marisol's voice was dry. Designed, built, then abandoned. That's the part that matters. We sat with that. In the silence, the building above us made a distant sound, like something heavy falling or a door slamming in the lobby. The infected didn't care about our planning meeting. They wandered and bumped and knocked. They made the city noisy in a way that felt wrong. Ken spoke first. "If there's a shelter," he said, "I'd rather be behind a blast door than behind a broom closet door." "And if the blast door jams," I said, You die in a very expensive box." Darnell leaned forward. "We're already in a box," he said. "At least a shelter is a box meant for humans." Marisol tapped her clipboard lightly once. "We don't have to commit forever," she said. "We inspect, we evaluate. If it's safe enough, we use it short term. If it's not, we walk away." "You can inspect a lot," I said. "You can't inspect everything." June looked up at me, her eyes steady. "That's true," she said. "But we can't inspect the street either. We can't inspect the people we pass. Everything is risk now. We choose the risk we can manage." That was the most honest thing anyone had said. So I led them. The service corridor where I had found the hollow wall was 2 levels deeper than my break room. We moved through a maze of utility passages, past electrical switchgear cabinets that still hummed, past water heaters and sump pumps, past a section where the air smelled damp and old. I kept my flashlight angled down and we used the dim emergency lights as much as possible. Light draws attention, and sound carries under buildings like it's on rails. When we reached the wall, Marisol immediately did what I had done. She tapped it. The sound was wrong, hollow behind a cinder block. She looked at me. "You're not imagining it." I shook my head. "No." Ken stepped closer. "How do we open it?" "That's the thing," I said. "If this is a real shelter access, it won't be a normal door. It'll be concealed." June ran her hand along the wall and found a faint seam. She smiled, not happy, but satisfied. "Paint it over," she said. "They tried to make it look like a wall, but they didn't change the geometry. This line isn't a crack, it's a joint." Marisol crouched and looked near the floor. "And there's a slight bulge," she said, "like hinges behind the masonry facing." Darnell's voice was tight. "So, we're standing in front of it." I felt my pulse in my throat. The city had been shoving us downhill for days. Now we had reached a door that might stop the slide, or might accelerate it. I looked at Ken. "You got that radio?" I asked. He nodded, unclipping it. It was a basic handheld, meant for security in a building, not for long range. Still, it had one thing we needed, a way to make noise somewhere else if we had to. "Turn it on," I said. "Volume low. If something comes from behind, we want warning." He did. I turned to June. "Keys," I said. June stepped forward. She studied the wall like she was reading a book. Her fingers found a small metal plate near shoulder height, painted the same color as the cinder block. She slid a fingernail under its edge and popped it open. Behind it was a keyway and a rotary knob. The metal was dull, but not corroded. It looked like it had been protected from air and moisture by the plate. June exhaled. "Okay," she said, "that's not a normal office door." "Do you have a key?" I asked. She held up her ring and shook it. "Probably not," she said, "but I might have something close." Marisol shifted. "We shouldn't force it if we don't have to," she said. "If it's a sealed system, breaking it could damage gaskets. Those gaskets are what make the door a barrier." Darnell looked at her. "You know about gaskets?" Marisol shrugged. "I know about things that keep water out. Air is just water you can't see." No poetry, I reminded myself. But the way she said it was just practical, like she was explaining a pipe fitting. June tried 3 keys. The third slid in halfway and stopped. She didn't twist it. She just held it there like she could feel the mechanism through the metal. "Not this one," she said. She tried another, thinner key, then another. The 5th key slid in smoothly. June froze like she didn't trust it. "Okay," she whispered, "okay." I leaned in close. "Slow," I said. June turned the key. The mechanism clicked, heavy and deliberate, not like a pin tumbler in a normal lock, but like a cam engaging. Then the rotary knob loosened. Marisol's eyes were fixed on the seam line around the concealed door. "Everyone back," she said. "If it's under pressure, it could push." We all stepped back. June turned the knob. At first, nothing happened. Then the seam line widened by the thickness of a coin. Air hissed out, a thin whisper like a bottle opening. Ken flinched. "That's air," he said. "Yes," Marisol said, voice tight. "That means it's been sealed." The hiss lasted 3 seconds and stopped. June pushed gently. The concealed door moved inward a fraction, then met resistance. Something heavy behind it. "Blast door," Marisol said, almost reverent. I stepped in and put my shoulder against the masonry-faced panel. I pushed. It swung inward on hidden hinges, and behind it was a second door, steel, painted a faded institutional green. It had a round wheel handle like you see on industrial hatches, and a stenciled label that had been partially scraped off. The remaining letters read, "Civil Defense." My mouth went dry. June shone her light on the stenciling around the wheel. The paint was faded but legible if you moved the beam slowly. "Close door," June read. "Turn wheel clockwise until fully seated. Engage locking dogs." Darnell blinked. "Locking dogs?" "Locking bars," Marisol said. "It's a term. It means the metal lugs that clamp the door." Ken leaned forward. "Open it." "Not yet," Marisol said. She pulled a small device from her tool case. It was a compact meter with a display. She held it up like a badge. "Air quality meter," she said. "It measures oxygen concentration and checks for carbon monoxide and hydrogen sulfide. It's not perfect, but it's better than guessing." Darnell stared. "You carry that?" Marisol nodded. "I was doing inspections when this started. I grabbed what I could. Old buildings can kill you quietly, even without an outbreak." She held the meter near the seam of the blast door and watched the numbers. "Oxygen looks normal," she said. "No carbon monoxide detected, no hydrogen sulfide. That's a good sign." "It could still be bad inside," I said. "It could," she agreed. "But we're not seeing a warning at the door." I put my hand on the wheel handle. The metal was cold. I turned it slowly. It resisted, then moved, and I felt the door's internal clamps retract with a series of heavy clicks. The blast door didn't swing open like a normal door. It released with a small pop, then sat there, still, as if it needed permission. I pulled. It moved inward, heavy as a car door. The hinges groaned, then smoothed out like they had been oiled long ago and sealed away from rust. A smell came out, not rotten, not chemical, just old, like paper stored in a dry place, like a museum basement. Behind the door was a short entry corridor that ended in another door. An airlock, basically. Concrete walls. Painted lines on the floor that marked where people should stand. Hooks on the wall for coats. A bench. Above the bench was a faded sign, block letters, the kind printed to be read in panic. Emergency decontamination procedure. Darnell said, "I don't like that." June read further, voice quiet. "Remove outer garments, place in sealed container, proceed to wash station." There was no wash station in sight, just the corridor and the second door. Marisol looked up at the ceiling. "2 doors," she said. "That means they wanted to keep something out and also keep something in. Airlocks work both ways." Ken's radio crackled softly, a burst of static. He flinched and turned it down more. I stepped into the corridor and shone my light along the floor. The concrete was clean, surprisingly clean, like this place had been sealed before it could get dirty. At the second door there was another wheel handle, smaller, another set of instructions, another warning. June touched the metal and pulled her hand back. "Cold," she said, "like it hasn't felt the building temperature." Because it's deeper, I said, and sealed. Marisol held her meter up again. Still normal, she said. Let's open it, but we do it in order. We don't let everyone surge in. If something is wrong, we need room to back out. Darnell nodded. Agreed. I opened the second door, and the shelter revealed itself. It was not the cinematic bunker people imagine. It was functional. Concrete, steel, fluorescent lights that came on with a flicker as if the place had been waiting. The lights did not fully brighten at first. They hummed, struggling, then steadied. Somewhere deeper, a fan kicked on, a low mechanical breath. The first room was a control area with a bank of switches and dials, all labeled. Many labels were in plain language. Some had abbreviations spelled out in full beside them, like whoever made them knew panic makes people forget. Along one wall were shelves of supplies. Cardboard boxes, metal cans, sealed plastic tubs. The cardboard looked brittle but intact. The cans were dull but not rusted. June approached a shelf like she was in a library. She read labels out loud. Emergency rations, she said. Water purification tablets, medical supplies, blankets. Ken whispered, "This is real." Darnell moved to the medical cabinet and opened it carefully. Inside were bandages, antiseptic wipes, old bottles of pain reliever sealed in blister packs. He didn't touch anything yet. He just looked. Marisol didn't look at supplies first. She looked at the ceiling, the walls, the corners. She followed the lines where concrete met concrete, where pipes penetrated through. Water intrusion? She muttered. Cracks? Spalling? I knew what she meant. Spalling is when concrete surface flakes off because the steel inside is corroding or the concrete is stressed. It can mean slow failure. What do you see? I asked. Not much yet, she said, which is good, but it doesn't mean the deeper structure is okay. There was a map on the wall, printed and laminated, showing the shelter layout. Dormitory rooms. A kitchen area, sanitation, a radio room, a mechanical room. A section labeled administration. A section labeled restricted. Of course, there was a restricted section. June traced the map with her finger. This is bigger than I thought, she said. I looked at the map and recognized the shapes in a way that made my stomach drop. The shelter wasn't only under one building. It extended under multiple parcels. It sat like a hidden ship under the district. Ken's eyes were on the blast doors behind us. If we close those, he said, we're safe. From what? Marisol asked. Ken swallowed. From them. Darnell said, and from everyone else. Silence fell because that was true. A sealed shelter wasn't just a refuge, it was a prize. It was the kind of place people would fight over if they knew it existed. June stepped closer to the control panel and read a faded placard bolted above it. Municipal Shelter 14, she said. Constructed 1962, capacity 200 persons, designed occupancy 14 days. Ken exhaled, shaky. 14 days. Darnell's voice was flat. 14 days is not forever, it's a bridge. Marisol's eyes narrowed at the date. 1962, she repeated. That means the wiring could be old, the filters could be old, the fuel could be old. The water storage could be compromised. We can't treat this like a magic box. I walked along the shelves and picked up a can. It was heavy, sealed, labeled, beef stew. The expiration date was a decade in the past. I set it back down gently. Outdated but intact, I said. That matches the story. June nodded. Civil defense supplies were meant to sit for decades, she said. They planned for that. Marisol looked at her. They planned for it to sit, she said. They didn't plan for it to sit without maintenance forever. We moved deeper, slowly, like we were afraid the shelter might change its mind and close. The dormitory was rows of metal bunks with thin mattresses wrapped in plastic that had yellowed. The air was stale but not foul. The ventilation fan continued its low, steady hum, pushing air through ducts overhead. There were vents with adjustable louvers. Someone had designed this to keep people from feeling buried. But there were signs of age. Paint peeling. A few water stains on a corner near a pipe chase. A drip pan under a valve that had left a brown streak on the floor. Ken found a small room labeled radio and pushed it open. Inside was a desk, a set of shelves, and an old radio console with a microphone like a museum piece. Beside it was a stack of logbooks. June picked one up carefully and flipped it open. The paper crackled. "Entries," she said. "Dates, frequencies written out. Notes about signal checks." She flipped further and her forehead creased. "It stops," she said. "There's an entry in 1986, then nothing." Darnell leaned in. "Maybe they stopped using it." "Or they stopped being here," Ken said. Marisol was at the sanitation area. She turned on a faucet. Nothing came out. She tried another. Nothing. "Water is off," she said. I moved to the control panel and checked the water switches. City supply was off. Storage was off. "Of course," I said. "They shut it down when they abandoned it." Ken looked alarmed. "So we can't drink here?" "We can," Darnell said, pointing at the shelves. "We have bottled water out there and rations in here, but we can't rely on taps." Marisol opened a steel door labeled mechanical, and a warm draft rolled out, carrying the smell of old oil and dust. "This is where the truth lives," she said. We stepped into the mechanical room and the shelter stopped feeling like a safe story. It felt like a machine that had been unplugged and forgotten. There was a generator, a large unit painted green, bolted to the floor. There were fuel tanks, pipes, a battery bank, and a ventilation system with a filter rack that held big rectangular filters in metal frames. Marisol pointed her light at the generator's exhaust piping. "Corrosion," she said. "Not catastrophic, but present." I followed her beam. The metal had pitting and rust at joints. Ken asked, "Can it run?" "I don't know," Marisol said. "And we do not just start it because we feel like it. If the exhaust is compromised, it can fill the shelter with carbon monoxide. That is a quiet, fast problem." Darnell nodded hard. "Thank you," he said. "That's exactly how people die in storms. Generators in garages. Everyone thinks it's fine." June shivered. "So we don't run it?" "Not until we test ventilation," Marisol said. "Not until we inspect. Not until we know where the exhaust goes and whether it's blocked. Also, fuel has a shelf life. Old fuel can turn into sludge." Ken stared at the tanks like they were bombs. I felt the shelter's promise begin to crack. Not because it wasn't impressive, but because it was honest. It was a system, and systems fail when ignored. Marisol moved to the filter rack and pulled one filter halfway out. Dust puffed into the air. She froze and slid it back in. "Do not disturb filters without a mask," she said sharply. "We don't know what's trapped in them. Dust, mold, maybe worse. If this was ever used for decontamination, the filters might have captured particulates they didn't want inside." Ken swallowed. "So the shelter can poison us?" "It can," Marisol said. "If we treat it like a miracle instead of a building." We backed out of the mechanical room and shut the door gently, as if the equipment could hear us. Darnell rubbed his forehead. "We still might use it," he said. "We just use it with eyes open." June held her keys like a comfort object. "Why was it abandoned?" she asked. Nobody answered because the question hung bigger than the room. The next hour became a methodical sweep. We checked rooms, we checked corners, we checked for trapped water, for rodent droppings, for mold blooms on walls. Darnell checked medical supplies and separated what was sealed and what was compromised. Ken stood watch near the entry corridor, listening for sounds beyond the blast doors. June read every sign like she was trying to reconstruct the shelter's history from its labels. Marisol measured cracks and tapped concrete, her mind turning the shelter into a set of numbers and risks. And I walked the corridors and tried to feel what the place wanted. Because places do have a feeling, even when you refuse to call it anything mystical. A building tells you if it is healthy. It tells you if it is stressed. It tells you if it has been ignored too long. Municipal shelter. 14 felt like a throat held shut. It felt like a held breath. In the administration area, we found a small office with filing cabinets. June opened them one by one. Most were empty, drawers pulled out and left open like someone had searched in a hurry. In the last cabinet, buried under loose papers, she found a thin folder with a stamped cover. Restricted, do not duplicate. June looked at us. We should leave it, she said, but her hands were already opening it. Inside were memos, typed on yellowing paper. Not many, maybe 10 pages. June skimmed the first and her face tightened. Marisol stepped closer. What is it? June read, voice careful. It's a maintenance notice from 1986. It says the shelter is to be placed in inactive status pending remediation. Remediation of what? Darnell asked. June turned a page. It doesn't say, not directly. It says there was an incident during a scheduled system test. It references air handling anomalies and occupant exposure. Ken's eyes widened. Exposure to what? June kept reading, her voice flattening. The memo says the shelter is to remain sealed. It says, do not enter without proper protective equipment. It says the incident report is classified. Marisol swore quietly, not as a performance, as an exhausted human reaction. Of course, she said. They never write the part you need. Darnell frowned. Occupant exposure means people were inside. Or staff, Marisol said. Test crew, maintenance team. Ken took a step back as if the paper itself could infect him. June turned to the last page and then froze. There's a handwritten note, she said. What does it say? I asked. June's eyes moved left to right, then she swallowed. It says, she read, sealed doors work both ways. If you lock it, you lock yourself. If you open it, you open everything. Darnell stared. That's not official language. No, June said. That's someone writing for the next person. Ken looked at the corridor behind us. We are the next person. The shelter's air felt heavier, though the ventilation fan still hummed. I knew that was psychological, but psychological weight can still crush you if you let it. Marisol took the folder from June, careful, like it might have residue. She scanned it again, slower. This doesn't tell us what happened, she said. But it tells us two things. 1, the shelter was sealed after an incident. 2, they didn't want people going in. Darnell asked, would it still be dangerous now, after all these years? Marisol looked at the ceiling, thinking. If the danger was a short-lived chemical, maybe not. If the danger was mold, it could still be here. If the danger was asbestos disturbed by a system failure, it could still be here. If the danger was a ventilation flaw that recirculates exhaust, it could still be here. Ken's voice was small. So we leave. June looked torn. We can't just go back into the streets. Darnell said, we don't have to leave immediately. We can set rules. We can use the entry corridor as a buffer. We can sleep near the exit. We can keep the blast doors open if we need to. Ken snapped, open? Are you kidding? Darnell held up a hand. Not wide open. But if we lock ourselves behind 2 blast doors and something goes wrong, we're trapped. That note is there for a reason." Marisol nodded. "He's right," she said. "If we commit to sealing, we need a plan for how to unseal fast. We need to test the doors. We need to know if the wheel mechanisms bind. We need to know if the outer concealed door can be opened from inside." I looked at them. "We don't even know if the concealed door has an interior release," I said. "If it doesn't, and someone closes it outside, we're in a concrete box." Ken's eyes were hard now. "No one knows it exists," he said. June lifted the folder. "We do," she said. "And if we found it, someone else can." That night, we stayed in the shelter, but we didn't claim it. We didn't shut the blast doors. We left them unlatched, pulled mostly closed but not clamped, so we could push them open without spinning wheels in panic. We moved our supplies into the entry corridor, not deep into the dormitory. We chose to sleep where we could see the way out. It felt wrong to sleep with an escape route, because an escape route implies you expect to run. But expecting to run is sometimes the smartest form of planning. Ken took first watch near the outer concealed door, sitting on the bench under the decontamination sign. He held his flashlight but kept it off. He listened to his radio at the lowest volume. Darnell sorted the medical cabinet and made a small kit he could grab in seconds. He moved like someone who had learned to work while tired. June sat with the logbooks in the radio room and read entries like they were a diary. She looked for hints, names, anything. Marisol walked to the shelter with her clipboard and measured cracks again. She marked a water stain with a piece of tape. She checked floor drains and sump pits. She tried to understand the shelter's health in the language she trusted. Structure. I sat near the control panel and watched the switches like they might flip themselves. Around 11:30 p.m., the first sign that the shelter was not just a quiet box came from the ventilation ducts. A faint clicking, like a loose damper flap. Then a soft rattle, like something rolling in a metal channel. Ken whispered from the entry corridor, "You hear that?" Marisol looked up, alert. "Air movement changed," she said. The fan pitch shifted. I listened. The hum was still there, but it had a wobble, like the fan was fighting resistance. Darnell stood, tired gone. "What does that mean?" Marisol moved fast to the mechanical room door and stopped herself, remembering her own warning about disturbing filters without protection. "We need masks," she said. I had a box of disposable masks in my supply stash, the kind used for dust in maintenance work. Not perfect, but better than bare lungs. We put them on. Marisol opened the mechanical room and stepped in, flashlight sweeping. She did not touch the filters. She watched the gauges on the ventilation system. "There's a differential pressure gauge," she said. "It shows how hard the fan has to work to push air through filters. If it rises, filters are clogged or something is blocked." She shone her light. The gauge needle was higher than she liked. "It's rising," she said, slowly. Ken's voice had a crack. "So, the air is getting worse." "Not immediately," Marisol said. "But the system is being stressed. Could be dust. Could be a damper stuck. Could be something shifting in the ductwork." Darnell asked, "Could be animals?" Marisol nodded. "Could be." June stood in the doorway, mask on, eyes wide. "Or it could be why they sealed it," she said. We all looked at each other because that was the fear we didn't want to name. That the shelter had a hidden reason for abandonment, and that reason was still here, waiting for someone to breathe it. Marisol backed out and shut the mechanical door gently. "We're not sleeping deep," she said. "We keep the blast doors easy to open. If anyone feels dizzy, headache, nausea, anything, we leave. No debate." Ken nodded too fast. Darnell's eyes met mine. "This place is not a home," he said. "It's a tool." I wanted to argue. I wanted to believe it could be more. but the clicking in the ducts continued and the fan's hum did not sound confident. We tried to rest anyway. I lay on the bench in the entry corridor and stared at the decontamination sign until the letters blurred. My brain ran through failure scenarios like it was flipping through a stack of bad cards. A door closes, a mechanism jams, a fan stalls, air goes stale. The shelter becomes a coffin with a control panel. At 2:20 a.m., Ken's radio crackled louder than it had all night. He sat up, startled, and slapped at the volume knob. A voice came through, weak and broken by static, but unmistakably human. Anyone here, shelter, please, they're in the... The voice cut out. Ken stared at the radio like it had spoken his name. Darnell was up instantly. "Say again," he whispered into the radio, even though it wasn't a two-way channel like that. "Say again." Nothing. June came out of the radio room, eyes wild. "I didn't turn anything on," she said. "That wasn't our equipment." Marisol's face had gone pale. "That means someone else is transmitting nearby," she said. "Close enough for a cheap handheld to catch it." Ken whispered, "Someone else knows about a shelter." "Or they're guessing," Darnell said. "People broadcast anything when they're scared." The radio crackled again. Another burst of voice, less clear. "Door won't open, it won't..." Static swallowed it. Then, for a moment, we heard something else layered under the static. Not a voice, a background sound. A dull, repeated thump, like someone hitting metal. Ken's eyes slowly moved to the blast door wheel handle. I felt cold spread through my stomach. "That's not on the radio," I said. The thump came again, faint but real, echoing through the entry corridor like the building itself carried it. Someone was hitting something metal, and they were close. Marisol's voice was controlled but tight. "Everyone, to the entry corridor," she said. "Now. Lights low." We moved as a group, no argument. The shelter's mood had shifted. It had stopped being a quiet box and started being a place with an outside pressing on it. The thumping came again, closer, then paused, then came again. It wasn't frantic, it was rhythmic, like a code. 3 hits, pause, 2 hits, pause, 3 hits. Darnell breathed. "That's a pattern." June whispered, like someone trying to signal. Ken shook his head. "Or someone messing with us." I stepped to the blast door and leaned close without touching it. I listened. No words, no raspy breathing, just the distant thump, traveling through concrete and steel. I looked at Marisol. "If someone is outside," I said, "and we open, we risk letting infected in. If we don't open, we risk leaving a person to die on the wrong side." Marisol's eyes did not flinch. "We don't open blind," she said. "We listen, we verify, and we remember the note." Sealed doors work both ways. Ken's hand hovered near the wheel handle. June whispered, "What if they're trapped? What if they found the outer door and closed it behind them?" That thought hit me hard. The concealed masonry door in the wall. If someone swung it shut from the outside, would it latch? Would it be obvious? Would we be able to open it from inside? I realized, with a sick clarity, that none of us had tested that. We had been so focused on finding the shelter that we hadn't tested the most important thing, whether the shelter could be exited if someone else wanted it sealed. Marisol caught my expression. "You just thought of something," she said quietly. "The outer door," I whispered. "We never tested inside release." Ken's breathing sped up. Darnell said, "We test it now." Marisol nodded once. "Yes," she said, before anything else. We moved to the concealed door. June placed her hand on it and pushed gently. It didn't move. She pushed harder. Nothing. Her eyes widened. "It's latched," she whispered. I felt the world narrow to that seam line. I tried the plate, the keyway. From this side there was no plate, no knob, no keyhole. Just concrete-faced panel and steel behind it. Marisol's voice went sharp. Is there an interior release? I searched with my fingers along the edges, feeling for a latch, a lever, anything. Nothing. Ken's voice was barely there. So, if it's shut... We can still open the blast doors, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We can still push out into the entry corridor. But not into the service corridor, June said, eyes wet now. Not into the building. We were already sealed in one direction, and we hadn't even closed the blast doors. The thumping came again. Louder now, like whoever was making it had moved closer to the blast door. 3 hits. Pause. 2 hits. Pause. 3 hits. Darnell whispered, "That's someone saying, 'I'm here.' That's someone with a brain." Ken looked at me like he wanted permission to panic. Marisol made a decision the way engineers do when the numbers turn ugly. "We are not waiting for that outer door to become our only doors," she said. "We find the secondary egress, now." I remembered the map on the wall. Shelter layout. There had been a label. Emergency exit. "Follow me," I said. We moved deeper into the shelter, away from the blast doors, which felt wrong, but we were looking for another way out, not running toward the noise. The emergency exit corridor was narrower than the main areas. It sloped upward slightly, then leveled, then split. One path was blocked by a steel gate with a padlock that had rusted into place. The other path ended at a concrete wall with a metal hatch set into it, smaller than the main blast door. The hatch had a wheel handle and a label above it. Emergency egress, do not block. I grabbed the wheel and turned. It moved, stiff but not frozen. The hatch opened inward, and a breath of air came through, colder and damper than the shelter air. Beyond was a ladder shaft going up into darkness. Ken whispered, "Where does it go?" I shone my light up. The shaft was lined with brick. Moisture glistened on the rungs. Far above, maybe 30 feet, I saw a faint rectangle of darker darkness. A hatch at street level, or maybe a basement level, or maybe a subway service access. Marisol held her meter up into the shaft air. "Oxygen normal," she said. "No immediate hazard detected, but it smells like damp." June asked, "Are we leaving?" Darnell's voice was hard. "We have to know we can," he said. "We have to know this works." We climbed part way, just enough to confirm the ladder was solid and the upper hatch wasn't welded shut. It wasn't. It had a handle. It was heavy, but it moved. We climbed back down, and for a moment the shelter felt less like a trap. We had a second door. But the first door still mattered, because it led back to our supplies, our known corridors, our little base. We returned to the main entry corridor and the thumping was louder, urgent now, and mixed with another sound. A muffled voice. "Hello?" the voice called, distorted by steel and concrete. "Is anyone in there?" Ken flinched like he'd been hit. Darnell stepped closer to the blast door, not touching it. "Who are you?" he called, loud enough to carry. The voice on the other side answered quickly, desperate. "My name is Cal. I'm not infected. I'm with 2 others. Please, we found the access and it closed. We can't get it open from this side." Marisol's eyes snapped to me. "From this side," she mouthed. They were outside the concealed door. They had found the shelter entrance, and the concealed door had swung shut behind them. Now they were trapped between the concealed door and the blast door in the entry corridor outside our blast door, in the airlock space. "Are you alone in the corridor?" Darnell called. "No," Cal said. "2 with me. We're quiet. We're stuck." Ken whispered, "If we open, they come in." "And if we don't," June whispered back, "they suffocate or get taken if something finds them." Marisol's voice went calm in the way people go calm when they're terrified but choosing to function anyway. "Cal," she called through the door, "listen carefully. We can open the inner blast door, but you need to stay against the far wall. No sudden moves, no noise. Do you understand?" "Yes," Cal said instantly. "Yes. Please." Marisol looked at us. "We open just enough," she said. "We keep control. We do not clamp the door. We can close fast if something follows." Ken's hands trembled, but he nodded. I turned the wheel handle slowly, feeling every click of the locking lugs retract. Then I pulled the blast door open a foot. Light from our side spilled into the airlock corridor. 3 people stood there, pressed against the far wall like they had been told to do. They looked exhausted, dirty, and relieved in a way that made my chest ache. Cal was a young man in a delivery company jacket, maybe early 20s. Beside him was a woman with a bruised cheek and a beanie pulled low. The third was an older man with glasses and a backpack, his hands raised. They did not rush. They did not beg. They just stood and waited, like people who knew the wrong move could end everything. Marisol said, "One at a time," and gestured. Cal stepped forward first, slow. He kept his hands visible. He moved through the gap and into our side of the shelter. Then the woman. Then the older man. As soon as they were in, I pulled the blast door back toward closed. Not latched, just mostly shut, because I didn't want to forget what we had learned. Doors can become traps. Cal's eyes were wide as he looked around the shelter interior. "You found it," he said, voice breaking. "We thought it was just a rumor." June asked, "How did you find it?" Cal swallowed. "We were running," he admitted. "We ducked into a basement. We saw a weird seam in the wall. There was a key plate. The woman with us." He gestured toward the bruised woman. "She used to do building security. She said it looked like a concealed access." Ken's jaw tightened. "And you closed it?" Cal nodded miserably. "It swung shut. We tried to open it. There's no handle on the inside. We were stuck in that corridor, and we could hear things outside the hidden door. We thought we were going to die in a hallway." Marisol asked, "What's your name?" to the bruised woman. "Annika," she said. Her voice was rough but steady. "I'm fine." The older man cleared his throat. "Dr. Howard Lynn," he said. "Retired chemistry professor. I know that sounds useless now, but I can tell you if something smells like a bad idea." Marisol gave a humorless smile. "We can use that." Ken pointed at the blast door. "We can't leave that open forever," he said. "If those things get into the outer corridor—" "They can't," I said, then stopped because I realized I didn't know that. The concealed door was shut, but could it be forced? Could someone outside reopen it with a key? Could infected push it if it wasn't fully latched? Marisol seemed to read my thought. "We need to secure the concealed door from the outside," she said, "but we can't. Not from here." June's eyes flicked to the emergency egress map. "We can go out the secondary exit," she said slowly. "Loop through the basements and open the concealed door from the outside. Or block it, or at least control it." Ken shook his head fast. "No," he said. "No one goes back out." Darnell's voice was firm. "We may have to," he said, "because right now, we're living in a shelter that can be sealed by anyone who finds that plate. We just proved it." Annika hugged herself. "There were infected outside the hidden door," she said. "Not many, but they were there. They were drawn by noise. We didn't make much. They still came close." Howard Lynn glanced toward the mechanical room. "If this place was sealed for a reason," he said, "maybe the reason is still here. and we're spending time arguing while breathing it." That snapped everyone's attention. Marisol looked at him. "Do you smell something?" she asked. Howard hesitated. "In the airlock corridor," he said. There was a faint chemical smell, like old cleaning fluid. Not strong, but present. June's face tightened. "Decontamination procedure," she whispered. Darnell rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm them. "Old cleaning chemicals don't scare me," he said. "But unknown exposure does." Marisol made another decision. "We do two things," she said. "We limit our time deep inside, and we secure an exit path that we control. We are not sealing ourselves behind doors we can't open." Ken looked like he might argue, but then the ventilation fan hum shifted again. A slight wobble that everyone heard now. Marisol's eyes flicked to the control panel. "The differential pressure is rising," she said. "The system is struggling." Cal swallowed. "So we shouldn't stay." "We shouldn't pretend it's safe," Marisol corrected. "We can use it as a temporary buffer, but we need a better plan." In the next hours, the shelter became exactly what the note warned about. A place where paranoia grows like mold, fed by uncertainty and sealed concrete. Ken wanted to close the blast doors fully, clamp them, make the shelter a fortress. He argued that any open door was an invitation for infected or people. His fear was not irrational, it was just absolute. Darnell argued for a controlled open, a quick escape. He was tired of boxes. He had watched too many people die because they couldn't get out of a place fast enough. June wanted to understand the shelter's history, as if understanding could make it less dangerous. She read the memos again and again. She traced the map and found a door on it that we hadn't explored yet, the restricted section. Annika wanted sleep. Cal wanted food. Howard wanted air. Marisol wanted data. I wanted something simple, and the city wasn't giving that to anyone. We waited until morning, when the sounds above were slightly less active, and then we moved to the restricted door. It was in a corridor that branched off from administration. The door was steel, unmarked except for a small red sign that said restricted. Authorized personnel only. The lock was a heavy cam lock, the kind that needs a key you don't just try. June held up her ring of keys like an apology. "I don't have it," she said. Marisol looked at the hinges. "We shouldn't force it," she said automatically. Ken scoffed. "We forced our way into everything else." Darnell's gaze was steady. "If there's a reason the shelter was sealed," he said, "it might be behind that door." Howard Lynn nodded slowly. "It might also be something you don't want to release," he said. That word, release, made me think of the filters again. Of trapped air, of old decisions. Marisol set her tool case down. "We're doing this carefully," she said. "If we open, and then we back away. We don't rush in." I looked at the control panel. There was a switch labeled Restricted Area Vent. "Off." I pointed. "It's isolated," I said. "That section has its own ventilation." Marisol's eyes sharpened. "And it's off," she said, "meaning it hasn't been circulating air with the rest. That could be good or very bad." June whispered, "Like a sealed jar." Ken muttered, "Open it." We didn't have the key, but we had something else, the shelter's own design. On the map, the restricted section had a second access from the emergency egress corridor, likely for staff. If we could reach it from behind, maybe we could avoid forcing the main door. We followed the egress corridor again, past the ladder shaft, to a second steel door set into the wall. This one was smaller and had a simple lever handle, but it was secured with a metal bar bracketed into the wall. Marisol studied it. "This was blocked from this side intentionally," she said. "They didn't want access." Darnell asked, "Can we remove it?" Marisol hesitated, then said, "Yes, but once we do, we can't pretend we didn't." No one laughed. The shelter had become full of irreversible steps. Marisol removed bolts with a hand tool, slow and controlled. The metal bar came free. She set it on the floor gently, like it was evidence. She opened the door. A smell rolled out that made everyone step back. It was not rot. It was not the infected smell you sometimes got from streets in summer. It was sharp and stale and chemical, like a closed closet full of old cleaning products mixed with something musty. Howard Lynn's face tightened instantly. "That," he said, "is not just age." Marisol raised her meter. The display flickered. "Oxygen is slightly lower," she said. "Not dangerous yet, but lower. And there's something else." "What?" Darnell asked. Marisol's eyes narrowed. "My meter isn't set up to identify everything," she said, "but it's indicating volatile organic compounds. That means chemical vapors. Could be cleaners, could be solvents, could be something from stored supplies." Ken's voice jumped. "Close it." June whispered, "Wait." Howard Lynn stepped forward, not crossing the threshold, just leaning close. He inhaled shallowly and then shook his head. "Formaldehyde," he said. "Or something similar preservative smell. It burns the nose." Darnell stared. Why would a shelter have formaldehyde? Howard's eyes were troubled. "To preserve biological samples," he said. "Or to disinfect. Or to store medical materials. Or—" He stopped himself. "Or something worse," my brain finished. Marisol didn't hesitate. She shut the door. The sound of the latch seating was final in a way I didn't like. Ken looked relieved. "We don't go in," he said. June's voice was tight. "But that's why it was sealed," she said. "That's the reason. That smell. That's what they didn't write down." Marisol nodded slowly. "Maybe," she said. "But we still don't know if it's a hazard that leaks into the main shelter. If that restricted ventilation is off, it might be contained. Unless there's a breach." Darnell rubbed his forehead. "So, the shelter has a sealed jar of chemicals inside it," he said. "And we're living next to it." Cal's voice shook. "We can't stay here," he said. Ken snapped. "We can't go outside." Annika spoke for the first time in a while. "Then we find a third option," she said. "We stop thinking like the city gives us only two choices." That was the moment, more than any thump on a blast door, that made me realize what the shelter was doing to us. It wasn't poisoning us with chemicals. It was poisoning us with binary thinking. Fortress or death. Seal or run. Trust or betray. The note had been right. Sealed doors work both ways. They seal people in with their fear. We spent the morning building an exit plan that didn't depend on the main concealed door. We agreed we would use the emergency egress ladder as our primary route out if things went bad. We would keep supplies staged in grab-and-go packs. We would not run the generator. We would minimize disturbance in the mechanical room. We would avoid the restricted section entirely. Ken still wanted the blast doors clamped. He argued that the outside corridor could be breached. Marisol countered with a hard fact. "If the ventilation fails," she said, "we may need to evacuate fast. I will not be trapped behind a door that takes 1 minute to spin open while people are dizzy." Ken stared at her. "Then you don't understand what's out there." Marisol stared back. "I do," she said. "I also understand what's in here." That evening, the shelter made the decision for us. At around 6:10 p.m., the ventilation fan's hum changed again, and then stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The sudden silence was so complete that everyone's head snapped up. The shelter felt instantly smaller, like a hand had tightened around it. Marisol was on her feet in one motion. "No," she said, and ran to the control panel. She flipped the primary fan switch off and on. Nothing. She tried secondary. For a moment, there was a click, a hopeful motor sound, then a stuttering whine that died. Darnell's voice rose. "What does that mean?" Marisol's face was tight. "Filters clogged or damper stuck or motor overheated," she said. "Could be a lot of things, but right now, air is not being refreshed." June's eyes were huge. "So we leave." Ken snapped. "We can't just leave." Howard Lynn's voice was sharp. "You can't stay in a sealed space without ventilation," he said. "Your own breathing changes the air over time. Not instantly, but enough to make you foggy, slow, confused. That's how accidents happen." Cal looked like he was about to cry. Annika grabbed his arm and held him steady. Marisol tried to open the mechanical room again, then stopped. She looked at the filter rack like it was a sleeping animal. "If filters are clogged, pulling them can dump trapped dust into the space," she said. "But leaving them means no airflow." Darnell stepped beside her. "We do not die here because we were afraid of dust," he said. "We move. We go to the ladder." Ken's jaw clenched. "We're giving up the shelter." "We're not giving up," June said, voice shaking but firm. "We're refusing to be trapped." We didn't argue anymore. The shelter had turned from a refuge into a hazard, and hazards don't negotiate. We grabbed packs. We turned off unnecessary lights to save battery, though it felt pointless. We moved as a group toward the emergency egress shaft. Behind us, in the main corridor, the blast door thumped once. Just once. Not rhythmic, not a code. A single impact. We froze. Ken whispered, "Someone's there." Darnell whispered back, "We don't have time." Another thump, then a voice, faint through steel. "Hello?" it called. "Anyone inside, please?" June's face twisted. "No," she whispered, like it hurt. Marisol's expression was grim. "We can't open that door now," she said. "We don't have ventilation, we can't add people, and we don't know what's in the outer corridor." Ken's eyes were wild. "So we leave them?" Darnell's voice was low and hard. "We leave the shelter," he said. "We don't leave people if we can help it, but we are not dying in here to prove we're good." Howard Lynn spoke softly, the kind of soft that cuts deeper. "The shelter was abandoned," he said. "This is why. Because when it fails hard, and it turns moral choices into traps." That sentence landed like a weight. We climbed the ladder. The shaft was damp and smelled like wet brick. My hand slipped once on a rung and my heart kicked. Above, the hatch was heavy. I pushed. It resisted, then moved, and cold air spilled down. I lifted it enough to peek out. We emerged into a basement utility room in a building I recognized by its layout. An older department store that had been renovated into offices and boutiques. Above us would be polished floors and bright signs in normal times. Now, the basement was dark, lit only by emergency strips. I climbed out first, then helped June, then Darnell, then Marisol, then Ken, then the others. We set the hatch back down, not sealing it, just closing it. We stood in the basement and listened. Faint noises above. A distant crash. A soft shuffling somewhere in the building. Not close, but present. Ken whispered, "We're back in the city." "Yes," I whispered back. "But we're not in the shelter." Marisol looked at me. "Can you get us out of this building without going into the street?" she asked. I nodded. "Service corridors," I said. "Loading dock. Maybe a connection to the underground concourse near Suburban Station if we're lucky. But we move quiet." We started walking, and for the first time in days, I felt something like clarity. Not hope, not comfort, just clarity. The shelter had been a promise, and it had almost killed us with that promise. It had almost convinced us that the world was two doors, inside and outside, safe and unsafe, us and them. But the truth was more complicated, and complication was where survival lived. As we moved through the basement, I thought about the memos, the missing incident report, the handwritten note. I thought about why a city would build a shelter for 200 people and then seal it and forget it. The reason wasn't written down because the reason wasn't a single dramatic secret. The reason was boring and deadly. A shelter is not a magic place, it is a building. Buildings rot, filters clog, motors seize, pipes corrode. Doors lose their tolerance, concrete cracks. A place designed for survival becomes a hazard if nobody maintains it. And the most dangerous part isn't the rust, it's the mindset it creates. The belief that if you can just find the right door and lock it, you can stop reality. Reality always finds another way in. We reached a service stairwell and paused. Above us, somewhere, something bumped into a door and moaned softly. Not a scream, not a movie howl. Just the sound of a human throat doing something wrong. Ken's hand tightened around his flashlight. He didn't turn it on. He didn't need to. He just held it like the idea of light made him feel less lost. Darnell whispered, "We keep moving. Quiet, together." Marisol nodded. "Redundancy," she said. "Not one shelter, not one door. Multiple routes, multiple options." June whispered, "And less paranoia." Howard Lynn adjusted his backpack. "Paranoia is a kind of poison," he said. "It makes you drink from the wrong cup." Annika looked at Cal, then at the stairwell, then back at us. "We'll find a place," she said. "Not perfect, just workable." I took a breath and listened to the building's quiet. I could feel the city above, heavy and broken, but still a city, still full of hidden passages and forgotten spaces. The shelter was not the answer, but the knowledge that shelters can fail, that sealed doors can trap you, was its own kind of answer. We stepped forward into the service stairwell, into the next layer of the city, carrying what the shelter had taught us. Never trust a single point of safety, never surrender your exit, and never assume that the thing built to save you wasn't abandoned for a reason. Behind us, somewhere deep under the commercial district, Municipal Shelter 14 sat in the dark with its blast doors half shut and its air still, a Cold War promise turned quiet warning. And in a world where the streets belong to the infected and the living were learning how to be careful with each other, warnings mattered more than promises. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.